I have like a question. I am a new student. Maybe I'm someone watching this video. And I come to you and I want to know how good I am at debate. What are the questions you ask me? How do you determine how good I am at debate? And like what my level is at and what I should be learning next and etc.
So it would depend on the format, right? So if we're doing, and I don't mean the debate format, I mean the format of how I approach this, right? Number one, in real life, if I actually had the person, I would have them do a debate, right? I'd be like, what's your preferred mode of debate, and let's do a debate. Do you have a file or whatever? And if
Right.
it's partly, we'd have them do a round and stuff. And I think that is probably the best way. And I would know almost immediately. And honestly, I'd probably know if I just saw their prep without having to actually see them in the round, because I think that those things tend to scale up together. But if I had to actually ask questions, I think that I would start by talking to them about stock issues and advantage structure, most likely, because that's like very, very basic level, right? To see if they're
Not on every
on
format, but yeah.
Yeah. And so
Dude,
I'd be like,
watched- I got something to talk to you about later, but go on.
that's funny. I can imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would probably start and I would ask them, okay, what is uniqueness? I think that is really one of the most important first questions in a debate, right? What is uniqueness? And I actually recently had this discussion with a team that's pretty successful in PF, and they did not know the difference between uniqueness and inherency. They kept calling
The
uniqueness
thing that I was going to
inherency.
mention was I was just watching, there was someone on the subreddit posted a analysis video of, I guess, a high-level PF round, and one of the guys is explaining his strategy, like they're explaining their strategies and whatever, and one of the guys is like, I think, this is just our style. This is like kind of like, not how everyone does it, but for us, like personally, I think like uniqueness is really important in the debate. Like, what? Yeah, dude.
Yeah. I think that fundamentally everything flows from the uniqueness debate. And that's where we have Ks, in which case then things get weird. But in most formats, in most debates, I think the debate flows as a result of the uniqueness debate. And so my first question would be, what is uniqueness? And like I was just saying, I talked to some students, and pretty good, successful competitors, gone decently far at nationals, qualified to gold TOC. And I asked them, like, okay, so I kept talking about uniqueness, and they kept saying inherency, and I'm like, you are confused.
Yeah.
Advantages do not have inherency. Inherency only exists in plan format debate because it's a question of the plan, right? So for those of you who don't know, inherency is what is the barrier in the status quo that prevents the plan from happening. And
In other words, why do we need to do this? Why isn't it going to be done on its own?
yes, and there's a variety of inherency, and a lot of the times you can just get around this question, right? Because some people talk about structural inherency, which is like, well, there's some system in place that means we haven't done this, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also the cheater inherency, which is called attitudinal inherency, where it's like, well,
inherency.
people just don't want to do it, which is fine, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I can understand that in theory, that makes sense as a justification, right? It's like, look, dude, we didn't get to pick the resolution. Like, we have to defend this thing.
Yeah.
If it's a bad topic and there's not inherency, then that shouldn't
Well, let's
be
not
our
get
fault.
too sidetracked.
Yeah,
So one of the
but-
things that you looked at is their ability to sort of navigate the whole uniqueness issue.
Yes.
What else would you ask me in order to sort of... Okay, say I don't know about uniqueness and all that. Mm-hmm. Is that just it? Like, at that point, you're like, well,
Yeah.
you're below the threshold? Or do you, like...
I wouldn't. No, that would be it. This would all be like, do not pass go, basically, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I know where you are roughly based on this.
Yeah.
For me, if you don't know what uniqueness is, you don't know anything about debate, really. And there's a difference, because I've had people be like, yeah, that, right? Like, I get it now, right? And I'm like, and then I kind of test them again, and they do know it. And I'm like, all right, so yeah, maybe you just heard of it by a different term.
Sure, or at least
Yeah.
you understand the concept, but you just haven't heard it called uniqueness.
So
Sure.
then the next level is format dependent. If it was partly, I'd ask them the difference between a link and internal link, but that doesn't exist for a lot of formats, so I won't worry about it. I would go to the impact level, and I would start asking them, okay, what's your poverty impact, or what's your extinction impact? How do we get to extinction? Why does nuclear war go to extinction? Why does disease go to extinction? Why does business confidence go to econ collapse? Right. One, I just kind of worked through a few of them, see how they are. And that one is less of a do not. Well, it's still like a do not pass go, but that question, I think there's a lot of distance between question 1 of what is uniqueness and then question 2 of what is your impact blocks or whatever. Because if you have that and you're good to go there, from there on, everything I ask you is going to be very technical, right? Let's talk about topicality. Let's talk about criticisms, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And we'd work forward from there. Whereas if you don't have a good impact block, then I have to recalibrate and be like, okay, let's go back kind of half steps, you know what I mean? And find their range. And I think after that, so let's say, I guess it's following the same thing, they don't have an impact block. I would then start asking them, okay, what if format dependent theory questions maybe, right? Topicality, what is that? If they're in PF, obviously they're not going to know what that is, really, so it's not going to matter. Criticisms, they're not going to know what it is. And so this is where it becomes very specific to format, I think, right? In PF, the questions would start centering again around impact debate and link level debate, I guess is what I would say. Or I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, I'd probably go to case construction.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at and what I've been thinking about, but
yeah, I think I would go to case construction, right? And meta level versus just basic understanding. And that's why I think, like I said earlier, the first thing I'd want to see is their prep. Because their prep should tell you pretty immediately, right? Are you prepping from impacts first, or are you starting with the uniqueness?
Yeah, which is a video we're about to make. But yeah, so here's what I'm looking at when I look at a case, and I'm trying to determine what level is this person at. I don't know that there's necessarily an order for these things. I'm just going to throw out some of the things that I look for. The first thing that comes to mind that I look for is the relationship between the cards. Do these cards tell a cohesive, bigger story, or is there a lot of extraneous details, right? I want things that are streamlined into one strategy, into one direction, meaning that what impact you're trying to reach in your last card, and nothing earlier leads any different direction, right? Because I think when you read the general cards or the general research, it talks about all sorts of different things, and people cut all the parts of that, and they're and also this creates this much traffic, and also it increases the GDP by all this much, and then the last card is and our impact is hunger. And it's well, why did any of the other stuff matter, right? So just a sense that when one of the cards is being cut, or when one part of the argument's being written, the rest of the case is being taken into account. That tells me that 1, you can research with a specific goal in mind. 2, that you're able to cut cards in a way that focuses where you understand how to focus an argument, but also tells me that you have a general sense of strategy, right? That in order for it to have focused on something, you have identified a strategy, right? We're gonna go for this, rather than let me list all the reasons that I found for why this might be good or bad. That's the first sort of baseline that I look for. After that, it becomes a question of what is this impact? What is this argument going for? It's funny because I think the worst cases have a lot of impacts, and then the near the tippy top level have 1 impact, and then better than that they have several impacts again. So it becomes confusing to the average person what the difference between the bottom and the top is.
This is the punch is a punch thing.
Right, exactly, right? But the idea is that when there's only 1 impact, that impact is going to be used in a very specific and a very strategic way. When people are even better than that and they have 2 impacts, that means that now they are going to treat it the same way that they were treating their 1 impact cases, but you don't know which they're going to do that with. The bad cases that have a lot of impacts are just kind of try to go for everything the whole time, right?
I think-
There's a big difference there.
I was gonna say, I think the only thing that might be worse than even the people who do the like 17 impact thing is the people who do the same impact twice.
Yeah,
That's
just,
the
you
worst.
just don't understand
yeah.
what the point of a new
Impact.
contention is, a new advantage or
And
disadvantage,
the impact
right?
again is people.
Yeah, it's still the same impact. So, like, here's an entire case that you need to read one impact defense answer against, and then the whole thing goes away. So, yeah, stuff like that. What I'm looking for beyond that is sort of on the impacts is, so there's like the number of impacts, and then it's like how good is this impact, but it becomes about the relation of the impact to the topic. Like, sure, like I think there's a lot to be said about generic impacts that are just extinction impacts, and I think they're lazy, and I think they're bad, and I think they're unconvincing, and I think a lot of debate formats try to discourage them and move away from it. I think public forum is sort of like a recoil away from where policy was, where like everything leads to nuclear war, everything leads to extinction. But with that said, I think it's important to have a sense of like, here is what my impact is, and here is like the scale of what this topic can give you in terms of impacts. And I think this is a strong enough impact. That same analysis video that I told you about, there was a one side talking about why uniqueness is really important. Like, yes. Then there's the other side that was talking about how our strategy this whole year has been to have like an affirmative case where if we won our case, we should win the whole debate. Which, like, again, like I'm glad they get that, but like it's like, yeah, that's how every case should always be constructed, right? Like, and so the idea is that, I don't know, let's pick an old topic, right? H-1B visas, right? Like, when we were writing that case, we knew if we win massive Ebola outbreak, like, we win the debate, right? There's nothing else this topic can generate reliably that is going to outweigh that. Like, nuclear war isn't going to happen because of H-1Bs, because H-1Bs come and go and nuclear war doesn't rise and decrease with it. Ebola does. Like, disease pandemics do increase and decrease based on doctors not being in certain areas, right? Or this new topic. What was the one that I just wrote?
Is it antitrust or is it?
No. The prison overcrowding. What's the topic? The criminal justice system,
Yeah.
right? Where you recognize, like, okay, we're talking about war on drugs. And I guess it becomes a strategy of, here's what it is if they have them recognizing where the clash is, right? Like, in that topic, I know that the negative must defend the criminal justice system, right? And that means they must defend people being put in prison. There is no way of defending the criminal justice system and not putting people in prison, right? Like, you can defend the status quo and say, but somehow people don't end up in prison, right? So you just figure out your offense. You figure, like that's the link I have. What can I generate off of that? And you, like, prison overcrowding and the tuberculosis pandemics that are, like, on their way because of that, right? Like, you recognize that this is always going to link no matter what the negative is running, right? Whether they're saying, like, we should increase, like, the rehab in prisons or whatever sort of case they're running or whatever they're advocating for, all you have to ask is, like, do you let people out of prison? And if they're not saying yes, then you have the link in, you know? Similar with what I wrote for that case on the negative, right? You research it and you think about it and you think, okay, if I can prove that alcohol is a drug, and I can prove that drinking and driving is an illegal use of a drug, those two things aren't granted. Those things are arguable in the debate, right? But if you win that debate, there is no way that the affirmative has out of not using the criminal justice system. Like, if you say we're not using the criminal justice system and drinking and driving is the illegal use of a drug, you are saying we don't pull over drunk drivers. Like, that's so recognizing, like, that's what the affirmative must defend if I win this and that, right? And yeah, like 3 million people get pulled over every year, or like 1 million get pulled over every year for drunk driving. You're telling me that your advocacy is we don't take those people off the road? Like, that's something that will apply to every affirmative because of what the resolution inherently like makes it so that they must defend it, but also has like a high level impact. Both of those impacts, like the tuberculosis outbreak, lower probability, really high magnitude. The drunk driving one, really high probability, and then the magnitude's not like as high as a global disease pandemic, but it's millions of people dying in car accidents. And why wouldn't we do this? And a lot of that stems from like the bad topic writing in public forum, and in just bad NSDA topic writing, which we've talked about, right? But so going back, what I look for in a case is like how good is your view of like, here is this topic and all the big plays that can be made from there, and here's all the like big impacts that can be derived from this topic and how they relate to each other. And like, is it a high magnitude, is it high whatever? That to me is like a really important step in being good at debate that doesn't necessitate you knowing any particular jargon. It doesn't necessitate you like having previous experience. Some people pick it up faster than others, but if you have that, then I know, great, I can teach you a couple things and you get really good, right? Like if I'm running a camp or something, right, and somebody's like, I got all that stuff down, tell them, great, go in the advanced lecture, right? You'll be behind on a couple phrases or whatever, just raise your hand and ask what they are. You'll pick up quick. But I think that's the fundamental of debate that a lot of people just sort of don't get, right? Like, I think there's, going back to like a lot of games, you can play a game for a long time without understanding like what you're really doing, like what you're really competing in. Like when you talk about like trading card games or something, right? Like Magic or Hearthstone or whatever. Like when you listen to people who are professionals or they make strategies in it, they use all of these terms and they talk about like tempo and all of this stuff that like a beginner just does not take into consideration. They're just playing a totally different game of like, this card says it can do this, this has this much attack power, and like the other stuff, which to advanced players is the whole game, like just isn't on their radar, right? Even when you take something like Jeopardy. Jeopardy on its face is a game of whether or not you know the answer. But there comes a point in Jeopardy where like, yeah, probably all three competitors know most of the answers. Otherwise they wouldn't get on the show Jeopardy, right? Mm-hmm. So the game isn't really about that. That's what starts the game. Like with chess, it's not like who knows what the pieces do. Like that begins the game. But it's like, okay, like now you have like hitting the buzzer. Now you have like which questions you pick. You have how much do you wager. Are you trying to find the daily doubles? How early do you try to find the daily doubles? Are you and like that becomes the game, and that the strategies have to do much more with that than with like, I'm gonna go home and study French history, because like that's a very basic beginner way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think League of Legends is another great example of that, where like for bad people, that game is about killing other champions, and for everyone who's any good at it at all, it has nothing to do with killing champions. The way you win the game is you destroy the other team's base. Killing the other champions doesn't destroy the team's base. It allows you to take the things you have to do in order to get to the base, right? Yeah. But it's only useful in that function, right? And so, like, you're playing a completely different game at a certain point. And I think that also, on the subject of the lab placement thing, right, is, and I've said this to you for years now, but I don't think we've said it on video. I think the difference between like a top 20 team in the country and a first day varsity / open level debater and a first day varsity / open debater and a first day debater period is way bigger.
Yeah.
I think people who've like reached the level of like pseudo mastery, like the blue belt equivalent in like jiu-jitsu or something, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you kind of know the basics, like you can do all this stuff. Great. You should be able to beat any random sort of scrub off the street, basically, in debate. That's what open means in theory.
Yeah.
Like there is nothing. Those people have nothing in common with the best people in the country, right?
Yeah.
So you could be in the top lab, and let's say there's 30 people in that lab, and if you're number 30, number 1 and you have nothing in common.
Yeah.
And so, like, why does it matter at that point?
Yeah, I mean, people are worried about like keeping up and catching up and whatever. But yeah, but yes, like the levels, it increases on a curve, right? So like the difference between, let's even just go by year, right? Let's just assume there's like a linear, like here's each year you improve. The difference between a second year and a third year is twice as much as the difference between a first year and a second year, right? Like you don't just get an equal amount better each year, right? You either stop getting better or you like progress at a much higher level.
Most people stop getting better, to be clear, too, I think.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably its own video topic, which I think we've talked about, like how to not stop getting better.
Sure.
But let's say someone is watching this and they want to know our opinion of how good they are. What should that person do?
I mean, obviously they could message us.
Sure.
And, like, you know, reach out either on Reddit or through YouTube. And, you know, if they have a video or a case they want to send us, we could probably give them some feedback on that subject. But, I mean, outside of a conversation or seeing them debate, it's going to be hard. But I would also note, I think this is important because it seems like maybe this is something we would do, right? Have them send in videos, whatever. We can only evaluate what we see in the video. We can't evaluate how you and your partner felt about each other that day. If you were hungry at the time, if the judge was giving you weird eyes, if you just couldn't hear well, like whatever, right? Like all I can grade, so to speak, is what you turn in. And so if you get a grade you don't like, I got the Lori Fisher, try again.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and the other thing is that it's hard for us to know like the context of like what sort of people are usually competing against. Like maybe you're very good compared to those people. Maybe you're not very good compared to those people. But I think that's what an objective measure necessarily entails. Which, you know, I think we're happy to do if someone wants to send something in for us to be like, here's where we think you're at. And
yeah, and just to be, we're not going to be mean about it. Like,
no,
you know, we might like make fun of you a little, but that's
no.
Just
we will probably.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I mean, like, obviously we just want to help.
Has to be something in it for us.
Yeah, right. We're doing this for free, dude. Come on, like, killing it down, like. But also, and this is maybe my last thought on the subject, because I think it would be really cool to do that. I also don't think it matters. Like, I just don't think it matters as much as high school students think it matters. Like, how good you are right now, or how good you could be, or any of that stuff, right? Like, it's great to be good, it's great to be excellent or whatever, but, like, if you're not, that's fine, and you shouldn't let that, like, make you feel bad.
Not good at most things I do.
Yeah. Most people, by definition,
are average.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's about it, right? Like, lab placements, how good are you compared to other people, tier lists, all that kind of stuff, like, it's whatever. And I would say, I can't remember who said this quote, but someone said that comparison is the thief of joy, or something like that. And that's true, right? Like, if you keep
and ultimately
yourself,
progress has more to do with motivation and perseverance. And I think people want to hear that they're good so that they can feel motivated.
But it's hard to keep.
But ultimately, yeah, like ultimately the people who do the best are the ones that are going to get themselves to do the work to get better. like are the ones that least need to be told they're good all the time. They'll probably get best the fastest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one down.
Down the hatch.